Well, thanks very much for inviting me here to present today. I'm sorry I can't be with you. COVID has struck again. Likewise, Jake has COVID, but he's having an even worse time than I am. But we've managed to put something together to share with you what we've been collaborating on so far. So I thought I'd start with just a brief slide that illustrated where I fit in, what my area is, and how that relates to the collaboration that I have with Jake. So in my general area, which is visual computing, there tend to be three different sub areas that you might identify. And they all relate to each other in this way that is shown in the diagram. My focus is really in computer graphics, which is, you could argue, could be summed up with how do I make something look real or move like it's real? And over the years, the area that I've been most focused on is how do you make a human face and make it move realistically. The other two areas deal with images and scene understanding, which is image processing and computer vision. And the questions there sort of indicate the kind of things that you try to do in those particular areas. And of course, there's research institutes at the university focusing on things like medical image processing. And then, of course, over on the computer vision side, a lot of the work these days involves something called machine learning to try to work out what you can see in an image. But I'm going to focus on the computer graphics aspects of things, since that's my particular area. And before I move on to the relationship with the video games industry, I thought it would be worth summarizing some of the other areas that I've worked in related to the cultural industries. So this is work on using virtual reality in relation to cultural heritage. So our work that we've presented at previous festivals of the mind, collaborating with a company in Sheffield called Human Studio, who are also are known as Human. And they are the company that provided the models that we then use in the particular software. So the first one was a museum from 2014, where we created a virtual museum that you used a virtual reality headset at the Festival of the Mind to experience. And what we did with that was put together three of the university's collections into that virtual museum. So we had the Alfred Denny Museum, we had the National Fairground Archive, and the third thing was the Turner Museum of Glass. And so you could wander around this virtual museum and experience those collections from around the university. So the public got a chance to see some of those things. We had some great reactions to that. And indeed, it was quite interesting to see how the public reacted to the use of virtual reality. I can remember one child was wandering around inside with the headset on, and you can see that there's a doorway there, so you can actually go outside the museum, and went outside and stared up at the sun, to which his mother said, "Don't stare at the sun, it will hurt your eyes." So it was a sort of a way to realize that people did actually get immersed and feel like they were part of a real museum as they wandered around. The second project in the middle there was to resurrect an old Sheffield location called the Hole in the Road. And again, it was Human who put together all the models for us. And then you could wander around and experience something that no longer exists in Sheffield. You can see that it's got a bit of the modern there because Primark is above the Hole in the Road, which of course it never would have been. And there's some tram lines, so there's no tram going over the top of the Hole in the Road there. But it was an interesting mix, and you could wander around this and re-experience things like meeting at the fish tank in the middle, for those of you who are from Sheffield. It was another collaboration with a group of people from around the university and with a company called Human. The one on the right is again an example of a collaboration, this time with the archaeology department, with Lizzie Craig Atkins and her work on the Charnel Chapel at Rothwell in Northamptonshire. This is a digital ossuary that we built based on scanning the subterranean area which stores bones. So all these skulls are piled up on the walls, and there are piles of bones in the middle of the room. It's quite inaccessible, really. You can get down there at certain times of the year to visit, but only by special permission. And Lizzie's team have been investigating this for a number of years because it's one of only 2 surviving examples in the country. And again, it was a collaboration across archaeology and computer science, and indeed with the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, who supplied us with the equipment to scan the space. Then I can move on to the work we've done on augmented reality. And so here it's where you are viewing the real world through some device. Typically it's a phone or a tablet. And then you mix in some synthetic element on top of that, or immersed around it, so that it feels like there's something new in the world that you're looking at. And so we did some work, again, a collaboration with Human, with architecture and archaeology. This particular project was led by Dawn Hadley. And we rebuilt Sheffield Castle, which of course no longer exists, down on the Castlegate area of Sheffield. And of course was destroyed at the end of the Civil War. And we put back a model of this castle so you could go down on site and see the castle in situ, or you could view it on your desktop through a mobile application, or you could view it through a tablet on top of a wood model that the architecture students built, and you could then have the castle overlaid on that. And that was at Festival of the Mind in 2018, and attracted a lot of good publicity. Indeed, we were on Look North and a range of other media outlets looking at the use of this idea of augmented reality to bring back things from the past to allow people to experience them. The one on the right is Below, which is a stone circle, a prehistoric site out in the Peak District. And you can see at the top there, the stones are in fact all lying down on the ground currently. What we did with augmented reality, working with Bob Johnson in archaeology and Graham McIlerney in APSI, was to allow you to use your phone or use a phone to see the stone standing. So we did a field trip with some of the archaeology students just before the pandemic hit. And you can see there, that's the view they would get as they wandered around the site. So you could have the stones stand up or lie down and walk around them and see what they might have looked like when they were standing. More recently, this is some of the work in the group, just to give you an idea of what we currently do in my research group. So we're looking at use of augmented reality in collaborating with robots. We're looking at what's called style transfer, where you take the style from a painting, you take a content image, and you apply the style from the painting to the content image, a photograph, and make the photograph look like it was painted in that style. And the work we're doing is to try to do that with computer games, so that if you can play a computer game, you could potentially select an option where the game would automatically change into a game in that particular artist's style. And on the right, some more of the work we're doing in different areas of computer graphics. So just moving on then to the work we are now doing in collaboration with Sumo in Sheffield. So this is as a result of a bid to the Royal Academy of Engineering for a visiting professor in game software engineering. So we bid for this. Jake is our visiting professor for the next further 2 years. And the idea of the visiting professor scheme, in case you have not heard of it, is to try to take somebody from industry and make use of their skills and experience to enhance teaching and learning in a department in some way. And so what we did in our bid was to bid on the idea of 3 different strands. So curriculum development, how can we use games as a sort of motivator within education? And as part of that, we're also taking the experience of the games industry in inclusivity and working with that and trying to incorporate some ideas from that into our own programs. Looking at employability, the games industry is quite interesting in the way that it makes use of portfolios to help decide amongst a group of applicants. It's one of the things they look for, the existing collection of material that a student is applying with and saying whether or not they're suitable. And so one of the things we're going to be looking at as part of our programs is how to help students develop portfolios to increase their employability in this general area. And then the third thing is later in the project, we've got a series of activities planned to try to help disseminate and to keep the ideas that we're exploring continuing after the VP finishes. So far, just to give you an idea of some of the things that we've been doing, we've been running focus groups with students, quite an interesting collection of views we've got about the games industry from those students. And also, what's come out quite interestingly is how many students are unable to link what they do on their programs with what an employer might want. And that's been quite an interesting thing to try to draw out of them in those groups. The skills they do have, but they don't recognize are skills that are wanted. And so that's something we're going to be building on as we move forward with the portfolios to help them to explain themselves when they're applying for jobs. We've also been arranging meetings with different module leaders and identifying where we might include things in particular modules that from our collaboration. So Jake has managed to obtain the rights and permission from within the company to make use of some of the assets from a couple of their games. And so we'll be using some of those assets as part of some of the code and materials we use in some of the modules in the department. Jake's given some guest lectures. So in one particular module, talked about legacy systems, which of course is something that affects the games industry when you take an existing franchise or an existing game and have to move it into new platforms and the problems and difficulties in doing that, which fits in with very clearly with one of our particular modules, which is all about how you re-engineer old software. He's a member of our industrial advisory board. And we had some of the students go out to Sumo's offices and meet with some of the level 7 apprentices that they're training there. The picture at the bottom actually is the staff at the company, not all the students that went. For those of you who don't know where Sumo is, it's near Meadow Hall on Brightside Lane. So just next to the Don as it flows past the steelworks there, the Forge Masters. Sumo is a large company, so they have offices all over the UK and also in India and Poland. And they organised a conference a few weeks ago, which the 700 developers they have at their studios were all invited to this. And as part of that, our students got a chance to present some of their work, including our Sheffield Women in Computer Science group, who also presented as part of that. And then we had a meeting at which we had some staff discussions to explore research possibilities, and that had staff from the engineering faculty, but also quite a few staff from the psychology department. So in summary, my research group has looked at the use of AR and VR in cultural heritage work. So very much we're on this sort of technical end of enhancing what other people are doing with their work. And then this new Royal Academy of Engineering visiting professor, although the focus obviously with the visiting professor award is on teaching and learning, because of Jake's position at Sumo, there are opportunities to explore all sorts of other research links with the company Jake, by in his background, is actually a cognitive scientist, and so is really interested in all of the questions around how people learn and how games can be used to teach. And for those who want to sort of follow up more on this, this autumn, Jake will be giving an inaugural lecture where I'll be exploring the engineering, the science, and the art of games in a lecture which we'll be advertising across the university. So hopefully that gives you all a bit of a summary of the kinds of things that we do and the collaboration that we've started with Sumo. And I'll finish there. Thanks.